Goldman Sachs says no longer expects the Fed to hike rates in March. Cities stress on banking system. This is a CNBC story that just came out. This comes out after regulations announces measures to prevent the spread of contagion following the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and the closure of Signature Bank, citing systemic risk. In light of the stress in the banking system, we no longer expect the FOMC to deliver a rate hike as its next meeting on March 22nd, said Goldman economist John Hatzius on a Sunday note. Goldman has previously anticipated a 25 basis point hike. Last month, the rate Federal Open Market Committee increased the federal funds rate by a quarter of a percentage point to a target range of 4.5 to 4.75, its highest since 2007. The bank still expects to see 25 basis point hike in May, June, and July, with a terminal rate expecting to be at 5.25 to 5.5. What do you think, Tom? Is he going to increase it, or is he going to stay flat and not do anything for a minute?
First of all, you got to remember who's talking here. Goldman Sachs is talking. It hasn't had the best of quarters, has been laying off people, and there's even been some very carefully written articles talking about David Solomon. But Goldman said this on Sunday. Goldman is lobbying to go back lower because it helps the banking industry. It helps them get cheaper money. That's what they're begging for. And by the way, Goldman is the same guys that worked with Silicon Valley Bank, from 2 weeks ago and couldn't get the deals done and couldn't get all that put together. So this is Goldman, I think, just kind of out there, knurfing for moisture, just trying to, grab a little bit and lobby. The other banks that are out there saying, hey, given a little uncertainty, we think 50 basis points off the table, probably just be 25. I think that's what we're going to see. But this was Goldman on Sunday, lobbying and hoping, in my opinion. And they're in a weak position. They haven't had a good couple quarters, as you've seen.
I guess my question is, you got Goldman saying some things. You got Barclays saying some things. You got the bond king, Jeffrey Gundlach, saying some things. Everyone's going to give their opinion on this. Is Jerome Powell going to be swayed by anybody? Jerome Powell is on a mission right now to bring down inflation. He's fighting that with the interest rates. Obviously, unemployment's also a factor. Jerome Powell, he's been battle tested. He's been through multiple administrations at this point. Is he going to continue the course with these rate increases? Is he going to stand pat, as the bond king Jeffrey Gundlach kind of pointed out? That remains to be seen. Like, is a bank failure or multiple bank failures like this enough to diverge his expedition of increasing rates? He's done a pretty good job of saying sort of agnostic to what the presidents have to say and what banks have to say. You saw that his interaction with, what was that, Senator Kennedy the other day.
From Louisiana.
Yeah, Louisiana, when he gave him a little breakdown right there of all the interest rate situation.
I'm not picking on you. I just want an answer.
Yeah. I'm cotton pick an answer. So
listen, Gundlach, the bond king, said the following. He says, to save the central bank's credibility, they will probably raise rates 25 basis points. I would think that would be the last increase. Gundlach, does not think that the Federal Reserve is going to slow down because of this. There's a lot of different perspectives here. There's Goldman saying one thing. There's Gundlach saying one thing. There's Bloomberg saying one thing. Bloomberg says Federal Reserve Jerome Powell plans to raise interest rates at a faster pace to curb inflation, has been disrupted by the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature, which has caused financial instability, meaning they're saying that he may not. Now, is this indirect way of Bloomberg and Goldman trying to talk to Powell to get him to say don't do it by putting fear in there? Who knows? Yesterday, Megyn Kelly hosted a debate. I don't know if you saw this or not. Vivek Ramaswamy was on there with David Sachs. It was a it was a 90-minute debate.
Vivek's everywhere right now.
It was a very, very good debate, and Vivek didn't back down about his argument. And they actually went at it. It was a very good position. Both of them presented a very good argument. Vivek said, you went out there and you put so much fear that they finally said, fine, here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to do a backstop and bail out the customers. And he's saying that is still the wrong move. And David is saying you're being irresponsible to think what you're thinking. I'm thinking about more the people. And then Vivek said, these are people that, they're not the small-time business owners. They're the bigger ones. It's not just the small and middle-income guys that are being hit. The point is, we don't really know what Powell's going to be doing. I don't know if Powell's the type of guy that is super predictable, where he's going to I think he is a sensible guy that he can be convinced, but he also has a backbone, meaning, which is exactly placed to be. I put him a high score for being able to reason in this specific context. I see him hearing out from everybody that calls him and saying, hey, they probably have a list. They probably have a list of banks that are next. Can you pull up the list of banks that are next? You just put like the next Silicon Valley banks. Who's on the list of the next Silicon Valley bank? Whatever. If you search it, it'll come up. They have a list of banks that they're looking at. And they know where they're at because many of these guys have to report their names. And the more these lists become public lists, okay, meaning if there's new names that pop up, think about what you're thinking if you have your money in that bank. You do not want to be on any list right now by any credible source.
Yeah, First
you understand what I'm
Republic,
saying?
yeah.
So
Isn't the list to be on?
No. So imagine the call being made to Jerome to say, hey, Jerome, here's what you need to know. If you increase the rates, you will officially be the first Federal Reserve chair to have 7 banks go under. Do you want that part of your legacy? Let me say this one more time, Jerome Powell. If you raise rates quickly like you've been doing, there's another 7 banks that are like Silicon Valley Bank that are going to get hit, and they're in the top 38, and they're $100 billion banks. Do you want that part of your legacy? And Jerome has to really think about that. He really has to think about that, especially when you look at FDIC, and FDIC's got how much money? $125 billion. Can you look at how much FDIC has right now? If you go look at how much FDIC is right now, I saw a number the other day, $35 billion as of yesterday or something like that. How much what do they have? Okay, this as of 2022. But do they have the number as of 2023? Okay, so they have 128 billion, give or take, to cover 1.26% of a total 9.9 trillion. So it's not billion, trillion, right? So I do think Jerome has to think about his next move and how quickly he increases rates. I do think he has to think about that because he could potentially, the fear that the opposing side could put on him is you will be known as the chair where the most banks went under your leadership. I don't know if he wants that. And I don't even know if that even does anything to his decision-making process.
Well, we talked about yesterday. We had a guest on yesterday who talked about that he thought with the new depositor protective in place, that protects against the bank run because everybody can calm down there and say, you don't have to run to the bank. If something ever happened to your bank, there's going to be a backstop from the federal government and this $25 billion fund that's been set up. And I said I thought there was a 25% chance of it happening. And specifically, I meant, First Republic, because and I characterized them yesterday, as I do now, as they're kind of hopping on one leg, and that's where it's going to go. So I'm unchanged from yesterday, even though I read a ton of stuff early this morning, PBD. If there's ongoing jitters, which really seem to be calming pretty quick in banking, I think he backs off the 50 because he doesn't want to jitter the system, but he's going to keep going after inflation. And I don't think it has to do, it's really interesting, the central bank's credibility. What do you mean credibility? This is not a thing where you say, I did what I said I was going to do. No, things happen. The economy moves around. We just saw over the weekend, a lot of things happen, sometimes pretty damn quick. And so I think he looks at it and says, is everything calmed down enough? Are we going to spook the system? No? Okay, well, then I'm continuing with 0.25 because we got to continue this march against inflation. And I think he's got a backbone. I thought he looked pretty impressive. We were making fun of Kennedy, and I'm sorry that anybody was offended by me using that voice. But I thought Jerome Powell handled himself pretty well and pretty stable.
I think so as well.
At that hearing.
And Tom, by the way, Rob just did a quick poll. 97% of the audience was offended by the way you made fun of Kennedy.
Tom,
so I just want to make sure you are
never
aware of that.
apologize,
Please
Tom.
work on your
condescending
approach towards the Kennedy.
I'll go down to New Orleans. I'll buy everybody a nice redfish.
Let me read a super chat here by Paul, which is kind of interesting. So shout out to Paul. Powell will continue to raise rates, stress testing the vulnerable ones, then bail them out. I mean backstops. Shore up the bank, making them even more powerful as Americans get crushed and lose. Okay, Paul makes
powerful or powerful? Well, there's a play on words.
Yeah, I like that, powerful. But he's saying powerful. By the way, there's a part of what he's saying that he's got a very good point. Because think about it this way: if if, the establishment and if these guys truly want to eliminate smaller banks and to make this thing even more nationalized,
this is when you do it.
Centralized banking. If that is truly the agenda, hey, Jerome Powell, if you really want to do that, don't raise it by a quarter. Don't do half. Go 3/4 of a basis point. If this guy goes half or
100 basis
higher,
points.
he goes half or higher, then there's a community of people that will say, I think they kind of do want to get rid of the smaller banks and bring them together. I don't know, Paul, if I'm there where you are right now, but if it does happen, there's an argument for that for sure, because it is strengthening the top 4 or 5 banks that they would sit there and say, big thank you. I'm sure if Powell raised the rates anything half or higher, he may get a nice bottle of wine and some nice cigars from the top 5 banks in America saying, hey,
Right.
You're amazing.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.